What's up, guys? Welcome to the Endless Endeavor podcast with Greg Anderson. This is going to be episode number 7. And what today's episode is going to be about is military contracting. And I have my buddy Toby Foulke back from episode 3.
Heyo.
Initially, we just did one long episode and kind of combined our military experience and our contracting experience. And we decided it's too much to put into one podcast. So we ended up doing our podcast and focused on the Ranger Regiment last time. And then I've been hit up a lot by people asking about the contracting world. And so I figured we'd dedicate a whole episode about what we did after we got out of the military and just share some of those experiences, because that's a lot less of an understood world compared to even the Ranger Regiment.
Oh, yeah. Oh, and it's so, everything is so different. As I was kind of, running through memories and making notes the other day and thinking about just like the selection process into GRS, it occurred to me that every class was probably different. There was no uniform process. The instructors would have been different. The facility may have been different depending, because it was a flat range that they were renting. So that they may have gone to a different place with different instructors and had a totally different selection process than I did, even one class prior.
Yeah, I remember like when we went through triple canopy selection, same thing. Rented ranges, rented rental cars. So we'll go into all that stuff and kind of talk you guys through what the contracting world is, what it entails, what the mission is, what selection was like, and then what our deployments were like as well. But yeah, I've had a pretty fucked week. So it'll be good to be able to just chill out for a little bit and shoot the shit about what we used to do in Iraq and Afghanistan and all over the world.
You're 72% back.
Yeah. Well, so I'll share that. I know we talked a little bit about it, but I got to share the story with you. What happened to my boat?
Your boat? Oh, yeah, that is a good story. You know what? It's not related to contracting, but you want to leave that for another time, or?
No, man, it's on my mind right now, so I might as well share it.
Send it.
Yeah, so we're at my academy. If you guys are watching on YouTube, you can see that we shoot the podcast from my jiu-jitsu academy. And this academy is on a big piece of land, and so I park my boat here as well. And I came to the gym the other day and realized both my downriggers were missing. And I immediately knew exactly what happened without any investigation. Some meth heads came and ripped them off and put them on the internet to make quick money.
No, they were fishing. Meth heads go fishing, deep sea fishing.
Yeah, exactly. So I ended up, they were locked onto my boat too. I had locking mechanisms that are supposed to keep them adhered to your boat.
Dude, meth heads know their way around bike locks, fishing pole locks.
Yeah, exactly.
Nothing is meth head locked.
I saw both my locks on the ground broken off. They probably hit them with a sledgehammer or something. And so immediately, being a cop for as many years as I was, the majority of my time on the streets dealing with any type of petty theft is related to heroin or meth addicts. Yeah. That's it. They're breaking into shit. They're stealing stuff so they can get their fix. And immediately, Jenny, that's my wife, she started looking on the internet and found them on OfferUp.
Of course.
Within 5 hours.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, because I'm a diehard mountain biker, we see all the time people will get their bike stolen, and immediately other people. I have a buddy who's like the straight up Craigslist ranger. Like, he gets on Craigslist, finds stolen bikes, goes to people's houses and says, I'm taking that bike because I know that is stolen. And it just like debos them. Like, no, this is my, and then he'll go find the owner and give it back to them.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, and it's a good lesson for me. And for anyone listening, anything that has value on it, make sure you just even like a dot of red nail polish or something that can identify it as yours.
Never thought of that.
Because what ended up happening is, so they're Scotty Pro downriggers, and they were running steel cable, and I snapped them when I was out fishing on accident because I bounced the ball off the ground and lost all my gear. And the only thing I had on my boat was green twine. And I was like, well, fuck it. I want to run cable, but I'll run twine because that's what I got. So I re-spooled it with green twine, and then I tied a couple, they're called stop beads, so the downrigger doesn't pull all your gear inside of it. It stops them.
Right.
And I had red stop beads. So you could see on the Craigslist ad, green twine and red stop beads. And I'm like, okay, I lost these 5 hours ago, and it's green twine, it's red stop beads. those are my fucking downriggers, 100%.
Yeah.
But there's more investigating to do to be able to prove it beyond a shadow of a doubt, right?
Right. Are those serialized?
They're not serialized.
Okay.
Yeah, that was that bummed me out because I mean everything's serialized now.
Yeah.
And so I ended up, they were sold instantly because he listed them at half price.
Super cheap,
you know? So I was like, fuck, what do I do?
By the way, if you're the guy who's buying like the bike, like the $5,000 bike for $400, like fuck you.
Yeah, exactly.
Or the half price downriggers, you know that shit's hot.
And so that was gone. And then the next, I started looking at he had like 5 items for sale. The next item was a little wood, like a wood shed that just for like storing garden equipment or whatever. And I was like, okay, well, if he's listing that, that's at his house.
Right.
Wherever that picture's taken, that's at his house. And I could only see 2 things. I could see a white mobile home in the background, and then I could see a quarter panel of a champagne colored Chevy Tahoe.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, well, I just got a lot of intel on the guy, and you can do a lot with that. It just depends on how much time you want to put into it, right?
Yeah.
And if you look at OfferUp, it won't tell you the item's location, but it'll give a map.
Gives you a zip code, right? Or
it said Marysville, Washington, and then it showed a map with like a big perimeter.
Gives you a zone to
like a general idea of where the item's located.
Okay.
And so I pulled up that perimeter on Google Maps and just started looking for white mobile homes. And started jotting down like different streets to go check and addresses. And after I felt like I'd on my map recon was able to figure out every single mobile home within that specific area, I just hit the streets and started driving around looking for a white mobile home. And there was a couple little like identifying factors where like there was a silver bucket hanging on the wall and there was a black cart, like little things that you wouldn't be able to find it based on that. But once I did find that Tahoe, could connect it all.
Yep. I'm still angry with you for not calling me.
And so I hit the streets. I drove around for about 3 hours checking off all these places. And it was literally the last place. That's how it works, right?
Yep.
And I'm driving by, and it's funny because you can see in your mind, or you can see in the picture what you're looking for. But then as you're driving through all these mobile home parks, everything's white, right? And then I'm also thinking the car might not be there.
Yes.
So I'm going to have to identify it based on the mobile home alone, possibly. And so I'm driving super slow just so I can make sure to see every detail. I'm sure everybody is like, what's this guy doing? Scoping out all the neighborhoods.
Yep.
And sure enough, one of the last places I see it, and I was like, oh, I think that's it. I'm almost positive that's it. So I parked, I snapped a couple pictures, and then I started comparing his OfferUp ad to what I was looking at in real time. And exactly that. I connected a silver bucket hanging on the wall, a couple other things. And I was like, boom, nice. That's my house.
Yep.
And I'd already made a police report by that time for insurance purposes, because petty thefts, normally you never see shit.
Yeah.
So I was like, if I knew I could find the guy on my own, I might not have made a police report. Just handled it myself, like, but I'd already made that report. So I walk up and I knock on the door, and this lady answers, and she's probably 70 years old. And this was just 48 hours ago.
Yeah. And
I go, hey, I saw you had a shed for sale. And she goes, oh yeah, my son listed that. It actually sold this morning. I'm sorry. It's not here anymore. So boom, got a connection now.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I said, oh, that's too bad. I was really interested in it. I said, hey, what about the other stuff that your son's listing? I see is like really high quality fishing gear. I'm assuming what is he like?
It must be a serious fisherman.
Yeah, it must be a serious fisherman, right? And she gets this kind of like a blank look, and she goes, no, my son's never fished. I said, well, for that kind of equipment, he has to have a big, like a nice boat.
Like a saltwater boat.
Yeah, saltwater boat. And she goes, my son's never owned a boat. And just give me this weird look. And so I was like, fucking, the jig's up, dude.
Bingo.
And so the next question, I just look her right in the eye. I go, how long's your son been addicted to methamphetamine? And her eyes got like as big as saucers.
Did she know?
Oh, immediately.
Was she aware that he was a drug addict?
Oh yeah, dude.
Okay.
So as soon as I said that, she's like, well, listen, my son, he's been addicted to drugs his entire life, and it's been a battle. He's been trying to do better, and you don't understand. And I was like, she just kept spewing all this stuff to try and like defend him.
Yeah.
But all it's doing is corroborating everything that I'd already put together.
Yeah.
You know? And so she goes, let me get your number, and I'm going to have him call you, and we're going to resolve this. We're going to take care of it. So I did that, full and well knowing I'd never hear a peep from them.
Yeah.
And then, so I contacted the deputy that took the report, and he went out there and interviewed her. A bunch of the same stuff.
Yeah.
She was trying to protect him or paint him out to be a good person.
Right.
But all she did was
continue to
implicate him
yeah.
and everything that he's done.
Right.
And she told the deputy, she's like, listen, I know that my son steals from people, but he steals from wealthy people. And what you don't understand what he's doing. He sells that stuff. He takes that stuff back and takes that money that he earns, and he helps the homeless people in these encampments throughout the area. And he's using that money to help people and save lives.
My ass.
Yeah. And he goes, yeah, but, and by save lives, you mean they all get high together and he buys drugs? And she goes, well, yeah, sometimes he does that. And so he goes, bro, it was fucking like everything that I needed to charge him criminally. She just spewed on the spot.
Yep.
And so still haven't got the guy, but we got a name, we got a picture, we know who he is, we know where he lives.
Is he living in a tent city somewhere on the side of I-5, or does he come home?
Well, he bounces back and forth.
Okay.
She said he never shows up to the house.
Got it.
Except he was there selling something this morning.
Right.
Shocking that he's never there.
So in this world of, I mean, police were already stretched thin. Now we're talking defund the police. It's kind of like, well, this is what you're going to have to do from now. You know, if you're a citizen and you're dealing with small theft and you want your property back,
you got to take it on yourself.
Yeah, it was already hard enough to get the police to do this kind of thing, and that now, that's where we're headed, right? Is you now, law and order is going to have to be taken upon the shoulders of the average citizen because we're reducing our police presence.
And that sounds like such a ridiculous thing to say. Like if you told me a year ago, hey, people are going to be real upset and they're going to consider just abolishing the police, I'd be like, dude, pull your head out of your fourth point of contact.
Yeah.
You know, like, come on, dude.
And in a weird way, like the libertarian part of me gets a little excited and is like, hey, as long as you're all right with vigilante justice, I'm all right with defunding police. Just don't get upset when I grab my rifle and roll up on some crackhead's house to get my bike back.
That's exactly right. And that's what we're going to see, man.
Yeah.
And I've been saying that since this whole thing kicked off, like literally since I made my video that got everybody all spun up.
That's the reason we're here.
Yeah. I was like, dude, you guys think you wanted to just like live in this lawless, like a land that's ruled by just whoever's the strongest tribal leader, whoever has the most firepower, whoever has the most followers, like that's who's going to rule society.
Yeah.
And you're either going to bow to that person or you're going to get killed or you're going to have to fight them.
Yes.
And unless you're ready to do that, guess what? Law and order is a good thing.
Yes.
So shut up.
Yeah.
Like, and I mean, fuck, we're going to go off on a whole other tangent.
Oh,
right?
yeah, that's fine. Let's take it where it goes.
But the thing is like, you want police reform. You're upset with some of the policies. You're upset with perceived racial discrimination amongst how law enforcement officers enforce the law. Like all these things that may have some validity. And if you approach it like a smart human being and you try and like, you know, create a platform, have a voice, actually try and implement change, that's one thing.
Right.
Just, you know what? I don't like what the police are doing, so let's just get rid of them altogether. If you think that that's going to help your cause, it's going to make everything that you don't like about police brutality, and it's going to exasperate it by about 10,000 fold.
Yes. And it's sort of funny, like even, you know, sitting down here tonight and talk, like we spent 10 minutes before we pushed the record button. What are we going to talk about? And it took us 30 seconds to go wildly off topic. However, we had kind of a plan, and you know, just when I talk about current events, the thing that stands out to me, if you look at the shining example of sort of civil rights reform, is Dr. Martin Luther King, and he had a plan, he had a goal, he had a clearly stated he had a thesis statement, basically, is that he wanted to end segregation. He wanted to end apartheid. And I think if you look at Black Lives Matter, it's almost like Marxist communists have co-opted the name. Everybody says, yes, we agree, Black Lives Matter. However, the political organization, Black Lives Matter, is not a civil rights organization. It's almost a political party. If you read their webpage and their stated goals, they're not a civil rights organization.
Well, and they're openly Marxist.
Yes.
And like one of the main tools that they implement is what they call the useful idiot.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Let's get all these people spun up on what we believe
Mm-hmm.
and make them empower our movement. And they're basically using all these people as pawns. And guess what those people are going to get in return? Jack and shit.
Right.
You know? And I haven't followed the money or seen where Black Lives Matter is spending all of these charitable donations that they're receiving.
Yeah, I couldn't tell you.
But they're literally like, you know, when you go to the grocery store and they say, hey, do you want to round up for charity?
Yeah. Oh, is that one of the options?
That's
now?
one of the options now.
Oh,
Kroger,
wow.
which is Fred Meyer's and like
Albertsons.
Yeah. If you look at the receipt, you want to round up for charity? Yes, please. It says Black Lives Matter.
No kidding.
72 cents.
Huh.
And the thing that I want to know is, and if anyone's listening that has information on this, please DM me on my Instagram. How much of that money has went into like inner city youth?
Yeah, or just even civil rights causes, or schools.
Yeah, schools,
housing.
education, trades.
Right.
Like, I mean, we talked about that off air a couple days ago, how the world is hurting for anyone with trades, welders, electricians, all that stuff, right? Like, you could take that money and if you would start to build programs in the inner cities, that could potentially be people's first step to making the great escape from the ghetto.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And the truth is, to my name, I have a high school diploma from a public high school and a journeyman's electrician's license, and I make a really good living.
Uh-huh.
And no, it didn't cost me it was 12 free years of public high school, and then I got paid to earn my journeyman's license. I didn't pay anybody. They paid me.
Yeah, man. I think maybe we'll sit down and do like a group think tank, because it could be it could be a really interesting podcast on that. Because I feel like, you know, the whole pull yourself up by your bootstraps. You've never experienced the ghetto then,
right?
Because that's easy to say, especially guys like us that grew up in stable households with a father and a mother that held like stable jobs, and they were hard on us, which in hindsight was a good thing, right? Like,
right. Oh, absolutely.
I was scared to death of my dad growing up.
Yep. And I'm hard on my boys. And multiple people have said to me, why are you so hard on those boys? They're so well behaved.
Well, there you go.
You bet your sweet ass they are.
But like when I was living in Los Angeles, working in Compton and South Central and like hood of hoods,
yeah,
some of those guys that we would arrest, talking to them afterwards, I had some of the best conversations of my life with dudes that I just arrested.
Single parent household.
Yeah, single parent household, like third, fourth generation in the same projects. Like their great grandfather was pimping hoes and slinging, like back in the day, it was crack.
Right.
And now it's methamphetamine and heroin. But they're pimping girls and they're slinging dope. And if your grandpa's doing that, your dad's doing that, your uncles are doing that, and then that's what you know from the time you're 4 years old.
It's the reason you don't feed the bears when you go to Whistler. It's because if the bear cubs learn to come beg for scraps off the table, then by the time those bears have cubs, all they know is to come beg for scraps and dig in the trash cans.
You know, and I was just listening to what's his name, Ben Shapiro, on Joe Rogan the other day, and he was like, well, you got to make a choice. At some point, you got to make a choice. And I agree with that to a certain extent. But in combination of that choice, we have to give opportunity.
Yeah.
You have to give people opportunity to make that choice. And yes,
and that's, so to tie it all back in with the BLM and the Marxist, capitalism gives you that opportunity. You can go out and get an electrician's license and make a really good living. and it doesn't cost you a dime. And it exists because you have that free choice to do what you like. You have the choice to work at Mickey D's, or you have the choice to, when I was, I guess I would have been about 28 when I was looking to get out of contracting, and I was starting to look around and see, hey, the only job skill I have is carrying a rifle, and I can shoot a tight group at 100 yards. So I can either work at McDonald's and cry and bitch that I should be paid more and minimum wage should be raised, or I can get my ass out there and figure out how to learn a skill that I was talking to a high school kid a couple of weeks ago, and I said, hey, look, if you want to get paid, you either have to do something that nobody else will do or nobody else can do. So I get paid well because nobody else knows how to hook up, or I should say not nobody else, but very few people know how to install a 1 megawatt generator into a hospital and connect all the control systems and yada, 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 and make the whole thing work. Brian, your buddy Brian, Dr. Brian Shealy, gets paid very well because very few people know how to do emergency trauma surgery.
Yep.
Right? The guys who pump the shit out of the honey buckets get paid well because nobody wants to pump shit out of honey buckets. So guess what?
Right.
They get paid like $40 an hour to pump shit. And if you don't want to take the time to learn, you could always just go pump shit. It pays.
Yep. And for you guys listening, Dr. Brian Shealy is one of our best friends, and he had 200 COVID patients in his hospital 2 months ago, and he's coming on soon to discuss all that stuff. So that'll be an interesting podcast.
Oh yeah.
Very, very he doesn't have an agenda.
Right.
And so he's just going to give the facts of what he sees. And it's not based on if you should wear a mask or not. It's just going to be based on science. So
right. But there will be people with an agenda who will not like his facts and will accuse him of having an agenda.
Yeah, of course.
So, that's what's sad about everything that's going on right now.
No, I know. It's sad. But, so yeah, I mean, the direction that Seattle's going, and I just experienced it firsthand. I lost $2,300 worth of fishing equipment. It's a direct result from the Western Washington's leadership that's just allowed this monster to just completely grow out of control.
Sold out for votes.
Yep. Tent cities everywhere, drugs everywhere, crime everywhere. And I don't know if people listening across the country are aware, but it was initially voted to defund Seattle police by 50%. And the city council passed that.
Yes.
And even that seemed asinine.
Right.
Like, okay, the city is rotting from the inside, so let's get rid of half of our law enforcement.
Yeah.
You have rocks in your head? Makes no sense. But now I just saw a new thing. The city council is now moving forward to completely abolish the police and have civilian, I forget the term that do you know the term they're using?
It was like civilian
conflict resolution specialists or something.
Yeah, exactly.
And I'm like, okay, because this is reality.
Yes.
And
this is happening.
What I'm going to tell you right now, 3 months from now, you might be looking back on this and say, wow, Greg must be Nostradamus. No, I can apply common sense.
Yeah.
This is what's going to happen. A conflict resolution specialist is going to show up to somebody that's having what's called excited delirium because his brain is fried on methamphetamines. All he wants to do is fight and fuck you up. And if you're not trained and you don't have the tools and you don't have the will, that guy will kill you.
Yes.
And so a conflict resolution specialist is going to get a steak knife to the jugular, and then everybody's going to go, wow.
You called that one, man.
Yeah, wow. Who would have thought? Who would have thought the cops carry all these tools on their belt just because we thought they carried all those tools because they were big jerks.
It's comfortable when you sit in a car.
Dude, let me tell you something about carrying tools on your belt. Because I'm proficient at fighting,
yeah,
I tried to talk my chain of command to I don't want to carry anything.
Yeah.
I don't want a taser. I don't want a baton.
Just in the way.
It's in the way because I know that I'm a good enough fighter that's what I'll go to if it's not a deadly force situation.
Right.
And if it is a deadly force situation, then I'll go to my firearm. Because, you humped gear around for 20 years. Every ounce counts.
Yes.
And at 40 years old, with all that shit on my belt, my back would kill me by the end of every shift. So it's like, people don't realize what it's like to be a cop. carrying all that stuff, having all these expectations on when's the right time to use it, when's the right time not to use it. If you do use it, you're getting scrutinized. And so, okay, well, let's take this tool away and let's force them to carry that tool. And the whole thing is just turned into a circus.
Yeah. Yeah. No, and, we're coming in here originally to talk about our experience contracting. And I got, we both saw some really like nasty places, third world shitholes. And it makes me wonder if the people who are pushing for all this stuff have been abroad. And I don't mean like Mexico, Canada, Western Europe. Like I would almost buy the plane tickets to fly someone into Islamabad and put them on a bus out to Peshawar just so you can see, or buy them a plane ticket into Mogadishu, just so you can see what happens in the absence of law and order. People are not you're not going to have this utopia of people sort of coming together in free love and whatnot. If you're a criminal, where are you going to go? To the place that has no law and order, because then you can do what you want to do. And then B, you'll have people within those sort of criminal circles will arise as basically warlords.
Yep.
Whoever's the strongest and the toughest and has sort of that, there's leadership on the bad side too. Some people are just innate leaders, and those people arise.
There's amazing leadership on the bad side.
Yeah.
I just watched the whole World War II in color documentary. Hitler.
Yeah.
That dude had a lot of shit figured out.
Yeah.
He was an evil human being.
But he wasn't dumb.
He wasn't dumb. He knew
crazy as fuck.
He knew how to
evil as fuck.
But he knew how to inspire. He knew how to rally people behind his cause. So I'm sure you know all this stuff already because you're a history buff. But Hitler was a war hero from World War I.
Yes.
And I wasn't even aware. I mean, I felt bad watching. I was ashamed of myself. Because when I was in New Orleans a week or two ago, I went to the World War II Museum and I was like,
it's okay. History is racist.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
So I was like, you need to get caught up on all this stuff because, I mean, I knew about Point du Hoc and the Rangers.
And you know what else is? People are tearing down statues all across the U.S., and there's a statue of Lenin standing in Seattle. Nobody has touched it.
Yeah.
That's another straight, just evil dude. And we like, we're pro-communism, we're socialist, we like this statue of Lenin, even though the Bolsheviks, like, they committed genocide. They were killing Catholics and scientists, and it was like straight medieval, wipe out anybody who does not fall into our way of thinking. And right now in China, there are millions of Muslims, these peoples called Uyghurs, in concentration camps. The Chinese Communist Party is keeping human beings in concentration camps as we speak.
Yeah, and where's the outrage?
Where is the outrage?
And where's the protest?
In fact, the NBA is running training academies just a few miles from the concentration camp. But hey, there's money involved.
And the people here want to bitch about what?
I don't even know.
What?
It's hard for me to come up with something.
No, I mean, perspective is everything in this world.
It is.
And I always kind of equate that to when food is taken away from you. When you're in Ranger school, a piece of lettuce, it just sounds straight up magical.
Dude, look what I went through. Everybody, if you guys listened to our last episode together, look what I went through for a jelly packet.
Yeah, for one packet of jelly, right?
And if you listened to Greg's reaction when I said it, he was like, "Oh yeah," like he understood. And anybody who's been through Ranger School is probably like, "Yeah, man, if you had that jelly packet, that would have changed your life for a few hours." And
so you take away food from someone before you know it. The tiniest little morsel of anything you're grateful for, and not only are you grateful for it, somehow flavor and taste change because your body knows you need that, and it's just amazing.
Yes.
But the same thing can be applied to like security.
Yes.
Like you take it for granted here because you can walk up and down the streets of Seattle, you can throw bricks, and you can say how much you hate police officers and just be a complete asshole. And if you did stuff like that anywhere else in the world...
There were mornings in Mosul when we would find bodies in the street, and it wasn't from Al-Qaeda versus U.S. Army. It was raiding party from the next tribe over. Imagine if your HOA sent out raiding parties into the neighboring HOA
Yep.
because of some 2,000-year-old feud, and you just went into somebody's house and whacked a whole family, drug their bodies out in the street, and then went back and went to sleep, and that's how you woke up and took your kids to school in the morning. Is we got to step over the neighbors.
Yep. Or put their heads on pikes to send a message.
Yeah.
Hey, we were in your neighborhood last night because, like you said, 40 years ago, your great uncle did this and we still hate you.
Yep.
And this is the message we're sending.
Yep.
And we used to see the same thing in Ramadi, where family feuds or tribal feuds, like everyone thought when we freed the Iraqis from the Saddam regime, that, like you said, it would just be sunshine and rainbows and unicorns. And dude, it was literally called Operation Iraqi Freedom. Hey, they're free now. Yay. Yeah. No, all of those like different factions that hated each other or had beefs were like, oh,
now it's game on.
We can do whatever we want now, and nobody's going to do anything about it. Roger that. Yep. Let's go kill this whole neighborhood. We hate those guys.
It was that rise of multiple factions, multiple leaders, multiple warlords sort of vying for power throughout the region. And, kind of to bring it back home to the U.S., the one thing I always tell people, because we have, some extended family who are at times get really upset that I own guns or that I would even dare bring them out when we're at the farm. It's a 200-acre farm. You're going to go shoot a rifle? How evil are you?
200-acre farms and rifles should go hand in hand.
Yeah. But, my thought on that is always when you see these, think about Black Friday when all the TVs go on sale at Best Buy or whatever, and people get trampled to death for a run on cheap TVs. Imagine what those same people are capable of when the grocery stores are bare and have been bare for
exactly
2 weeks.
And you have some rice in your garage.
Exactly.
And somebody found out about it.
Yeah.
Yeah. But we're in a time now where the people that are lining up to trample each other for a TV, those are the type of people that get caught up in the moment.
Yes.
They're instant gratification.
Yep.
And I want this deal and I want it now. And dude, I'm guilty of instant gratification.
A lot of it's virtue signaling and narcissism.
Yes.
I want to show how great I am and how with it I am, and they don't actually, their heart isn't really in it, but they just want to be. It's almost like remember back on our first episode where I said I miss that camaraderie. It's like people are disenfranchised now. You work in a cubicle. You don't really have any tight relationships. Your family, like my family lives in Oregon and Massachusetts and whatnot. People are sort of spread out. Nobody has a tribe. You don't have a platoon.
Yeah. And
so I think people are really, really, even if they don't know it, like deeply subconsciously yearning for belonging and for for a tribe to belong to.
Yeah, for sure. And this is kind of tying it all together, because like what I was saying about those people that are just in it for the moment, and they're like, everything that they do is how to just generate wealth and items and gratification for them, not a community, and they're not planning anything out. They're not looking long-term. Whereas then you got the other side of the coin. And this isn't the people that are on CNN and have cameras in their faces. It's guys like you. It's guys like me who do have guns, do have ammo, are getting the right provisions, are coordinating with the right people, are building networks. And I'm actually, dude, I'm going to do a podcast hopefully soon. There's a guy who's a former unit guy and he's open about it because he figures like, you know what? We need to start building a network.
The silent majority needs to start being a little more or a little less silent.
And have all these networks in place so when things do go bad, I mean, the 3 rules of combat, you got to be able to shoot, move, and communicate. And combat and being in special operations it's physically hard and it can be mentally draining, but the concept of warfighting has been around since the beginning of time. And sure, the weapons change and the technology changes, but the battlefield.
Stay mobile.
Yeah.
Stay in touch. Yeah.
And so he wants to build a network of people and then get us all connected through ham radios. So once the grid goes down, because that's what's going to happen.
Oh, I say that all the time. If communism takes over and I can make the same amount of money working the drive-through that I can busting my ass on a job site, I'm never going back to a job site.
Yeah.
And then who is going to maintain, literally, if the electricians don't go back to work, who will maintain the electrical systems? If the plumbers don't go back to work, who's going to maintain your wastewater treatment plant?
And so it's like 6 months ago, I did have guns and I did have ammo, because I've always thought, worst case scenario, if you have those two items, you can make the rest fall in place.
Oh, yes.
But it's going to be difficult. And so over the last couple months, I've realized, like, oh no, you need fuel. You need communication devices. And it may sound like you're like a tinfoil hat guy.
A year ago, I would have said that.
Yes,
and
me too.
Today, it sounds pretty pragmatic.
Because you get rid of the police and you let these, like you said, like these people rise to these warlord level positions. There's only one answer after that. It's guys like us taking our country back.
Or at the very least, neighborhoods and communities are going to have to protect themselves.
Yep.
It wasn't that long ago. I mean, what the Wild West was called the Wild West because there was no law and order, and people just had to sort of take it into their own hands. And it was only, what was the Industrial Revolution, like 1913-ish, something like that? That's when, that's kind of when, or I guess big cities were being built before that. But, you go back, not that it's only 200 years ago, where there was a lot of vigilantism and kind of just look out for your neighbor and, take care of your own beefs and whatnot. And there's no guarantee, like it's not written anywhere that American society will continue on an upward trajectory. If you just think that you're going to sit passively by and let the good times roll, that's not written anywhere.
Nope. Yeah. And every empire falls.
Yes.
It's just going to happen at some point. Will it be from this? Who knows? But I had a lady, I probably told you this before. I had one of my neighbor ladies, and I won't say anyone's names for OPSEC reasons, at the bus stop. And she's like, "Hey, Greg, I just wanted to let you know that me and her husband, me and so-and-so, we bought like 500 pounds of rice, and it's in the garage." And I said, "Okay." Like, luckily I'm a good guy. So I said, "Listen,
don't tell people.
Let me
that.
explain something to you. That right there, that's an OPSEC violation. Okay. If you're preparing for worst case scenario, the only people that need to know about that is you, and then your family, and then people that are directly, because she's a friend of my wife's, but we're not close enough for her to be disclosing that kind of stuff. Right.
Yeah.
And then she looks at me like dead serious and goes, "My husband told me to tell you because he knows you have lots of guns. And we don't have guns."
Some of Jen's friends have said the same thing to her, that if all this goes crazy, they're coming over to our house.
Yes. And dude, I'm literally sitting there thinking, wow, this is a 35-year-old soccer mom
who's going to come to my house looking for safety.
Building alliances.
Yes.
Between food and firepower.
Yes.
In the year 2020.
Sounds a lot like Mogadishu.
Yeah, it's insane, man.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's where we're at.
It's crazy, dude. I used to say, when we'd go home and get drunk on the porch with my dad and my brother, and I'd say, "There's no way we will see a civil war in this country in my lifetime. I don't need to be one of these crazy prepper guys." And now the odds are rising.
Bro, it's time to get property in Idaho and build a tilapia pond that
right.
grows your own garden and all that stuff, Yeah, so let's talk about military contracting. Right. And I'm just going to give a basic overview of what it is, why it existed, and how we got caught up in it. And please interject at any time. But after 9/11 happened and the wars kicked off, and then especially after the invasion of Iraq, which was March 19th, 2003, it goes back to what we were just talking about. There was a big power vacuum when Saddam was overthrown. And initially out of the gates, everybody thought like, oh, Iraq's going to be great now. And it was for a month or two.
The reason I got out of the Army.
Yeah.
Is it was really calm.
Yeah, it was like, okay, well, that was it. And statistically, engagements ever since Vietnam had been very short. We went in, we did our thing.
The Desert Storm had been the longest one, I think, at like 3 weeks.
Yeah. So I don't think anyone saw what was about to happen with this power vacuum.
Actually, I think there were people sort of like of course, they're the guys nobody listens to are saying, hey, if you remove yes, Saddam is evil. He's a terrible person. He's also the stabilizer of the entire region.
Yep.
He doesn't just keep Iraq under control. He keeps Iran and Syria and all the little all these little tribal factions. The Middle East is so confusing. I've been reading the hell out of my Middle East history the last year, and it is so hard to oh my God. Every time you think you've got it figured out, you pick up another book and go another layer deeper, and it's like, oh man.
And it's just there's a lot of violence to that culture because that's what they've known since the beginning of time.
Yep.
And then in Iraq specifically, you got the Shiites, the Sunnis, and the Kurds. But even within those own elements, they eat their own, even within those.
Yes.
And so it didn't take long before they realized we need to somehow figure out how to bring stability to this region. And the main contracts that I was working was with State Department. And State Department basically had State Department diplomats that were assigned to all the different provinces of Iraq. And they were basically shadowing the mayors and the governors, and they were helping them understand how to run a democracy successful, how to implement voting, how to give the people a voice, and then how to allow these newly elected leaders, how to help coach them on actually being leaders with more of a Western ideology to how they do business, as opposed to what they've known since the beginning of time is, if this
crush and destroy.
Yeah, if this guy crosses me, he'll be strung up from the overpass.
Yeah.
And so, and again, it was obviously they were pushing a Western ideology on how they wanted the government structure to start to work. So Al-Qaeda in Iraq and the insurgency, that's exactly what they stood against. They didn't want a Western footprint, They didn't want the infidels getting any type of traction in their lands.
Yeah, and not only that, it was, just right what we were just talking about is you had all these tribal leaders sort of rising up and vying for a seat at the table. They all wanted, the Sunnis, the Shias had been held down by Saddam for so long that now this was their chance. And I think the Iranians were pretty heavily involved, even though it's not really admitted, because Iranians are Shias. And so they were also pulling a lot of strings inside Iraq, and that, the Muqtada al-Sadr and the uprising there in Sadr City.
Yeah.
And so all these guys were there was no template for how the government was going to look for a while. And so everybody regardless, we didn't know if it was going to be a dictator or some sort of, like Congress or whatever, but everybody wanted a piece of that pie. And in places like that where there's no law and order, you don't get a piece of that pie through campaign rallies and whatnot. You get a piece of that pie by getting on your vehicle with your .50 caliber and going and killing the guy who is your competition.
Yep. And so you take now you want to create a footprint with a Western ideology, and that's exactly what so many people over there stand against. And you have our State Department over there. You have our intelligence agencies over there. You even had I even did a contract with what's called IRI, the International Republican Institute.
I remember you telling me that, and I was like, wait, what? Like the political party?
Yeah. And that's inside of Iraq.
Yeah.
And so what do you need if you have these diplomats and these case officers and all these people going around all these different provinces and cities and setting up meetings and trying to sway people to this side and trying to get votes? You need security teams. And right away, that was not a military mission. And they knew, and I don't even think you could use it as a military mission.
Well, the Clinton administration, remember when we were in high school, they drew down the military big time. So when these two, we found ourselves involved in both Afghanistan and Iraq, the military just straight did not have the manpower. And then the next thing they found is that I think it was for every grunt on the front line, there were 13 support people behind him.
Yes.
And so when you think about that from a money standpoint, that's crazy.
Yeah.
Whereas these contract companies could have 3 people in an office in Virginia and 50 guys in the field in Baghdad.
Yep. Yeah. The ratio of support to being an operational person was completely reversed.
Yeah.
And so just from a straight, not only from like a policy driven standpoint, but a financial standpoint, State Department and all of these agencies were like, well, we need pipe hitters.
Yes.
We need good security teams. And so where do we start looking? And initially when contracting first started in, was it late 03, 04?
Yeah. Actually, I think long before them, there were, I think DynCorp was running in like the Gaza Strip and whatnot. But it wasn't, I mean, honestly, you can go all the way back to Africa in the 60s and
Sierra
70s.
Leone and all that stuff, dude.
Yeah. So it's not like military or paramilitary contracting was a new concept. It just blew up and became this huge industry.
And so right after me and Toby got out of the Ranger Regiment, that world just started taking off. And it started taking off kind of like behind the scenes. Like you weren't hearing about it. We also, I mean, that was 2003, 2004.
We had dial-up internet.
It's exactly. Like everybody wasn't on Facebook sharing everything and Instagram saying, dude, this is what I'm doing. Everything was kind of low key. And I know like you'll tell your story of how you found out about triple canopy, but we'd both got out of the military and we had both went into college. And even though I was getting college paid for by the GI Bill, it still, I was 22. I wasn't ready for it yet. And I knew that. And plus you just got out of Ranger Regiment. So it's like,
fish out of water.
Yeah.
On campus.
Fish out of water. And you miss the guys, you miss the platoon, you missed the camaraderie. And then I got a phone call from Storter, and he was up in Alaska somewhere in a reserve unit and said, hey, I know a guy who's a former CAG guy who's part of founding the company Triple Canopy. And he kind of told me what it was about. And at that same time, you got hit up through a different avenue, correct?
I think it sort of spiderwebbed through remember that? We had so many like E5s and senior E4s get out of that platoon all within like 8 months of each other. And I think it sort of spiderwebbed through that group, and I don't know where it started. And I think it might have been Zach, because, bored at college. Zach's in Minnesota. I was in Oregon, and we would just sort of like call each other to BS on the phone. I think he was the one who, remember Bernard from Snipers?
Yep.
His dad was also retired from Delta, and I think may have been involved in the early days. And so Zach said, hey, I was talking to Bernard. His dad's doing this. I'm going to email you this website. And so, get on, let the old computer dial in. And it pulled up this kind of, all websites were kind of crappy.
Uh-huh.
But I remember vividly the picture was of guys fast roping into the jungle out of like one of those MH Hind, like Russian helicopters.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And it was like, oh, man, I'm kind of floundering here at school. I'm not really, getting good grades, but I'm not enjoying it. I have no idea what I want to major in. I keep talking. Zach and I would, when we were on the phone, would be like, it might be worth going. If like 3 or 4 of us all went back to second bat, it'd be worth going back. Strap on the old kit and go saddle up one more time. And I was like, oh, here's the opportunity to go saddle up again with my buddies, and with no enlistment, just take a contract. And I wasn't even thinking about money. I didn't care. I was like, as long as they pay me E5 pay, like $600 a month or something, I'll be happy.
Man, I always joke I would have done contracting for free.
Yeah.
Free. It was such a good time.
Yeah.
So we got everybody from our community kind of got dialed in at the same time, and we ended up contacting them, and they reached back out to us, and they were spinning up fast, and they needed bodies, but they needed good dudes.
They called me on a Tuesday and wanted me there Friday. And actually, I think I had to negotiate because it was right at the end of the term. And I said, hey, my last final is on Thursday. How about I not fly out tonight and I fly out Friday morning?
Give me a couple days to tie up loose ends.
Yeah, exactly.
And so we both flew out like almost immediately down to West Memphis, Arkansas, where they were running their selection. And if you listen to our Ranger selection podcast from episode 3, that was a lot of yelling. It was a lot of in your face, trying to break you down. The thing about this company is they'd ask for a resume, and if you weren't from a special operations unit, it went in the garbage.
Yeah.
Like you weren't even welcome they wanted bodies and they wanted to run selection. They needed guys, but at the same time, they had a standard set and that was it.
Yeah.
And so when you got there, it wasn't like a beatdown like military selections. I mean, there was PT, there was a lot of shooting.
There was stress, like stress courses on the shooting range, but there was no yelling. And
Yeah.
in fact, I'm not even sure they would tell you if you did well or not. They're just kind of there taking notes.
Yep. And that's Triple Canopy, for those that aren't familiar, was a contracting company similar to Blackwater. And I mean, similar in like the mission and kind of how it was structured, but it was very different than Blackwater. And it was started by Delta guys. So guys that are at the pinnacle of the special operations.
Yeah. And really something we should hit on with contracting is the, pop culture is how military contractors are all evil, money grubbing, et cetera. And there were those elements in there, and there were different contract, like Blackwater got a horrible name, but then Blackwater they probably had 40 different contracts. They had State Department contracts. Yep. They had CIA contracts. They had UAV contracts. They had static security contracts, mobile security contracts. And all of those contracts had a different personality. There was no standardization. It was totally driven by the people working on those teams. And then even like, you get into 2008, 09, you'd see guys like walking out of a chow hall with polo shirts on that said like Nighthawk LTD. And you're like, the fuck is Nighthawk? And it's like, it's just some dude in his garage who wrote a contract proposal and was the lowest bidder. Uh-huh. So they awarded him a contract and he hired, 17 reserve deputies from his rural, reserve sheriff's force and sent them all over to Baghdad. And so you had no idea. I mean, contracting could be a bunch of Rangers and Force Recon guys, like some serious talent, or it could be you'd run into guys who, some of them, I ran into a guy. His qualifications was that he was a wildlands firefighter. Yeah. It's like, and you're over here with a M4 and body armor running the streets? Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow, dude. Like, wow.
Good luck.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so that selection was all based on, there was a good PT standard. There was an exceptional shooting standard, but not only, they also taught us a lot there too.
Yes, I learned a lot there.
And then they ran us through like how a security detail works, how to drive tactically, like high speed driving courses, which, I remember taking Suburbans to the track and going 70 miles an hour around the track in reverse.
Yeah.
I'm like, dude.
Yeah.
That might not sound that fast. It's fast in reverse.
It actually might have only been 45 because it feels like just a little twitch on that wheel causes that front end of that thing to just swing around.
But the biggest thing that I think they were looking for there, and it's why Rangers absolutely thrived with that company, is dudes with open minds. Your eyes are open, your mouth is shut, you're here to learn, because that's the Ranger Regiment way. And until you have a little bit of, you've kind of established yourself within the team, hey, I'm just here to take it all in and be one of the guys. Yeah. And that's a good, like, healthy approach to being a new guy, a fucking new guy, right? An FNG. Eyes are open, mouth is shut. Yep. And I always say that is how you should approach being a new guy, no matter where it's at, unless it's a safety violation. If you're seeing something that could get someone hurt or killed, step up and change it right now. But outside of that, sit back, take it all in, and then figure out how to implement change the correct way. Because you're going to get pushback immediately if you're the new guy saying this or that. Yeah. And remember, we saw guys at selection. That's not the place to argue tactics. It's not the place to say, hey, what about my way? What about this? What about that?
I was in SEAL Team 2 for 14 years. You can't tell me that.
Yeah. And we saw that happen. Make the team. And guess who was gone the next day? And so it's just interesting. It's like, not only is that not the correct way to approach being the new guy or a selection, but it's not playing the game at all.
Yeah. I had a football coach tell us something once that really has stuck with me over the years, and I think it came from martial arts. And he used to call it, come with your glass half empty. And so if you have a glass of water and it's half empty, and that water is your experience, you may go to a training course or training course or school, etc. And those instructors are going to pour a little more water into your glass. And if you don't like that water that they pour in, you can always pour it back out. Or you can pour half of it out and keep half of it. Pour a quarter of it out, keep 3/4. It's up to you. But if your glass is full, they can't pour any water into it. And you will never get new water. You will always have the same water in your glass. And so I've always kind of remembered that, and like, just listen. When an instructor's talking, just listen, because they might be 90% full of BS, and you might get one little tidbit out of a 5-day course and go, oh, you know what? I'm going to take that little tidbit, and I'm going to keep that one.
Yep.
So.
And I'm not going to do a podcast without at least making one jiu-jitsu reference.
Oh, hell no.
But bro, that's what we always say at seminars. Like, world champions, guys that are like the best in the world, will come up and they'll teach 2 or 3 hours. And your brain is on overload by the end of a seminar. You can't learn 3 hours of technique, right?
Right.
But I always tell my guys, if you can leave a seminar and add one trick or one tool to your bag, that's a success.
Yeah.
You learned something new, and you're leaving that with a new trick and
you're that much better tomorrow.
So it's the exact same thing. So by the end of that selection, do you remember like the attrition rate? I don't remember it.
It wasn't terribly high because the vetting was already pretty strict just to be there. I'm sure we passed like 85 or 90%. I think the only guys who got dropped were the ones who, like, it was attitude. It wasn't performance.
Yeah.
There were guys who were dropped for attitude, but I don't think anybody was dropped for performance.
Yeah. And I mean, if you're coming from a special operations unit, you better be able to shoot in PT. So yeah, those performance issues shouldn't even arise. But we both got picked up, and then I think you shipped out right away, right?
Yeah, it was about a week, because I remember I had moved out. I had nowhere to live, so I basically went home and was couch surfing. And it was a week or 2 weeks. And remember, they were paying us retainer. We were making like $500 a day just to sit at home.
Yeah, I remember they sent me home. I was home for 3 weeks.
Yeah.
And they said, hey, we're going to pay you retainer to not go to work for anybody else.
Yeah.
I'm like, what? They said, yeah, we're not ready to deploy you yet, but we've already vetted you. We ran you through selection, and we want, you're one of the guys we want to put on a team. And in that time, like I said, the contracting world was just blowing up. They were afraid that you might get a phone call from another company and bounce. So we will pay you this much a day to not work for somebody else. I was like, yeah, I can sit around. I'll be the best employee ever that sits around and does nothing.
The best retainer you've ever had.
And so you flew out like a week later, and then mine was about 3 weeks later.
Yeah.
And go ahead and just tell them about your experience when you hit the ground with Triple Canopy, because it was very different than mine.
Yeah, so we flew from New York to Amman, Jordan, and then you get on that little commuter flight from Amman into Baghdad. And you remember the first time they dropped the bottom out of that plane? They don't tell you that, but because Baghdad was hostile territory, these planes, they would get right over the direct footprint of BIOP, Baghdad International Airport, and then they would almost go into a nosedive, like a spiraling, circling nosedive down to the runway on their approach.
Yeah, they'd call it the corkscrew landing.
Yeah, and they didn't tell you this was coming. So this is like that our story of being on the back of that Chinook when it started firing all its chaff and flares. So you had all of a sudden you're like, oh crap, we just got shot down over Baghdad. But anyway, so we get into the terminal in BIOP there, and we're all just sort of standing out front like tourists. We got a couple suitcases that have our body armor and stuff in it, and we're all just sort of standing there wondering, like, well, all right, what now? And after about 10 minutes, here comes this guy in like it was one of those like 12-seater Kia vans, which is sort of like the Middle East equivalent of think like a Volkswagen bus, but with third row seating. And he's like, get in, guys. So we just kind of piled all our luggage on top and climbed in, and he drove us down Route Irish, which at the time we had no idea is the most dangerous road in the world. It was ambushed regularly.
The HOD.
Yeah.
The highway of death.
Yeah. Was it almost, wasn't there like 3 ambushes a day there at one point or something like that?
And I'm assuming your little minivan was thin-skinned?
Thin-skinned. We had no weapons. Our body armor was in our suitcases because we assumed we're rolling into like, when you're in the military, you land inside a secure perimeter unless you're making a combat landing, in which case you're running off the ramp locked and loaded.
Yeah.
So at some point we got to, I think it was at Camp Dublin where they had their headquarters.
Mm-hmm.
So we got to Dublin, and they're kind of showing us the map, and we're like, we just drove through the red zone in that thing with no weapons, And I'm like, red flags are starting to pop up, and okay, well, let's get our weapons issued, And whoever was giving us the orientation says, oh yeah, your weapons aren't here yet. They haven't arrived. Customs held them up in New York, so I won't say any names, but they're down at the souk, the market. They're procuring you guys some weapons. So they came back later that afternoon and sort of had laid out all these busted ass AK-47s that looked like they were left over from like the North Vietnamese had probably used them, and then they'd been buried in the ground for a while and dug up and transported to Iraq. And they didn't have enough ammo to give us, I think they had enough ammo to give us each like 45 rounds, magazine and a half about, and these guns hadn't been test fired either.
So you got no optics, no zero.
Nothing.
You don't even know if they work.
I don't even know if it functions, and it's looking rough. And they gave me it had Cyrillic writing on it. It was a handgun, and it looked like a CZ-75, like a cheap knockoff of a CZ-75. But the holsters they had issued us in Virginia were Kydex molded holsters for Glocks.
Glock 19s.
Yeah. So I was like, kind of dropped that thing into this holster, and it was rattling around. And then every time I would sit down, I only had three. They only gave me 3 9mm rounds. And every time,
hey, that's enough to have an ND.
that's about all you can do with it. Every time I would sit down, because it was rattling around in this holster that wasn't fitted for it, the magazine release would get depressed and this thing would fall on the floor. So we went to the chow hall at Dublin there, and I sat down in my seat. We're looking like the high-speed special forces guys, long hair, civilian clothes. And I sit down in my chair, and my magazine hits the floor. And I was like, oh, dang it. You got to pick this thing up and stick it.
Send me home.
Yeah. And so I think I slept on it one night, and I was kind of talking to the other guys, and, man, what do you think? And they were everybody was unhappy, but nobody was sure, what do we do? And I finally said, you know what, man, I'm not running the streets with this equipment. And I went and talked to the project manager there, and I said, hey, bro, give me a ticket home. And he just said, okay. And I was on a flight back to Amman that afternoon.
And that's the beauty of contracting.
Yeah.
If at any time it gets stupid, I'm out.
Yep.
And so I arrived a couple weeks later, and the weapons had still not arrived. They were still caught up in customs. And I got issued the same shit, the CZ knockoff, the AK-47s. And then I got sent to Ramadi. And I remember the team leader, we called him Pigpen, and he was a former unit guy. He's like, hey, just know out here, it's not a matter of if, it's when. And they actually got ambushed when the initial team went out to set in Team Miami, which was in Ramadi.
Yeah.
They got hammered.
Really? On their way into
town?
On
their way in. Like, they got all the guys ready from Baghdad, and then I was on the second wave beefing up the team. And that was in April of 2004 when the early April, they got hammered pretty hard. Same time around is when the Blackwater guys got strung up from the bridge.
I was just going to say, that's right about when all the Fallujah stuff went down.
And so...
And Ramadi's a rock throw from Fallujah, right?
Oh, we drove through. We went to Fallujah 100 times. So it's literally the neighboring city. But I don't remember how far it was off the top of my head. We're also driving 135 miles an hour everywhere we go. So it feels quick, but it might have been 40 kilometers or something.
Okay.
But so we get there, and they issue me this AK-47, same thing, just an old piece of shit. And we took it out on the range, and every time I would fire, it would extract the rear.
Oh, tear the casing
30% of the casing. And then the rest of it stuck in the barrel, and you'd have to take a cleaning rod and go from the front of the muzzle and knock the rest of the casing out. And I'm like, dude, what the fuck is this?
Yeah.
And so we ran a couple times like that.
Did you get in contact with that rifle?
No.
Okay.
So that's what I was going to say. Dude, that contract was paying between $760 a day and $1,000 a day.
Right.
Depending on your position in the team. And so for a young Ranger, okay, I don't have the right weapons, but I'm making $760 a day. I'm going to roll the dice, dude. And
Shit.
everything ended up working out kind of like a blessing in disguise, because you know how the fighting works in the Middle East. Once it gets super hot, it kind of dies down. At least that's what I saw in Ramadi. That summer, it was, I mean, in Iraq, it's 120 or whatever it is. And so, like, the end of May, June, July, dude, we were running a lot in Ramadi, and we didn't get any contact.
Oh,
And so I started thinking, like, oh, dude,
this is easy money.
this is easy money. This is kind of like Afghanistan. Like, maybe I'm just the good luck charm. Like, everywhere I go, I don't get ambushed and I don't get in gunfights. Like,
Yeah.
awesome. It was like $25K a month or something. So a couple months went by, making good money, having fun, and meshed really well with the team. We had it was like a 16-man team. All the dudes were awesome. There wasn't drama. We'd just run the cities. And again, we were taking our State Department diplomat to all of these meetings. Most of them were at the governor's center, which is downtown Ramadi on Route Michigan, for anybody that's been there. Very familiar with that place. That's where the majority of our meetings were happening. And we go down there almost every day. But we would still obviously be tactical, set up primary, secondary, tertiary routes, always change the time and just do things tactically sound. But we weren't having any problems. And that all changed on August 10th, 2004. We got word, because you have a bunch of local interpreters.
Yeah.
And the interpreters have family out in the city. And the family out in the city knows a guy who knows a guy.
Yeah, they talk to their cousins who've been at the mosque with all the people in their neighborhood, and the rumor spreads.
And that guy's Al-Qaeda in Iraq.
Yeah.
And so our interpreter came in, and he's like, hey, mister, we've been told that they're going to kill all you guys this afternoon, and that they're calling you the half-beards, because military service members are clean-shaven, and then in their culture, they want to grow their beard out.
Right.
Contractors always have like the 2-week, 3-week,
Yep.
just grow out, you know? Yep. And so they called us the half-beards, and they said there's a bounty on your heads, and we're told that they're going to attack you guys when you leave today. And we're like, yeah, whatever.
Bring it,
you know? And we left the governor's center, and we turned left on Route Michigan. And we were staying on a place called Camp Blue Diamond, which was only a couple miles away. It was a quick trip. And we got maybe halfway through the trip, and then there was a bunch of cinder blocks across our primary route. And we're like,
red flags.
Oh, fuck, dude. And so we ended up taking the first right that we could take once we saw those cinder blocks across the road. And then we came up to another intersection, and 2 of the routes were blocked off with like cement jersey barriers. And Zach was driving limo that day, and I was in the follow, and the guy in the lead, again, was the project manager. Always liked to be in lead.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's the most tactically sound place, but he always wanted to be up front, see what's going on, right?
Yeah.
And they made that turn, and he's like, we got to get the fuck out of here. Like, we're being funneled right now. And the hair on the back of your neck just stands up.
Absolutely.
Right? And everybody knew, okay, now we were forced to make one turn, which is tactically a no-go. Like, they're now dictating where the motorcade's going, not us.
At the cinder blocks, you should have been reversing and going back to the governor's center.
But the thing is, yeah, that could, like, hindsight's 2020, right?
Yeah.
But the governor's center, to get back to Camp Blue Diamond or Camp Ramadi, which is on the other side of the river, you have to go across 1 or 2 bridges.
Oh, I'm saying just go hard point.
Yeah.
This happened to us a couple times in
just,
Mosul, where it just, you know what, we're not going home tonight.
We're just going to hang out here until it's safe to do otherwise.
Yep.
And so we ended up exactly doing that, reversing out. Hey, let's get the fuck out of here. And then a guy popped out, and the driver of the lead's like, I see a hooded gunman, 12 o'clock, however many meters. And he's like, that cocksucker has an RPG. And you can actually find this ambush on YouTube.
Is that right?
It's the one where he was listening to Johnny Cash. Yep, that's the one, man. And dude, if we had went 40 more meters, we would have been
trapped,
straight up clear and present danger.
Yeah. Leaving the vehicles, fighting to a hard point.
Where we all would have died, dude, because they had RPGs, a couple of PKM nests set up, and it was just That was the X.
You guys reversed out at the last
We
possible
reversed out
moment.
at the last possible moment. And so as we started reversing out, they realized, fuck,
You got to spring it.
they're not going to the X. We got to hit them now.
Yeah.
And so they started raking the cars with PKM, and those we were in BMWs and Mercedes, and they had level 7 armor, and those cars got chewed up. And dude, not one round.
Not one came
Dude,
through.
it was, I fell in love with bulletproof glass that day. And then the best part is it was the limo. It was Zach's car. The gas tank got hit with an RPG, and it detonated,
Oh.
and it blew the bottom of the gas tank out.
And that self-sealer.
And it flattened all the tires,
Yeah.
but we had run flats on the tires,
Yeah.
and the gas tank, all the gas just spilled out all over the road.
Oh, weird.
Just like whoosh. And so you could see all the gas going out of the gas tank.
No kidding. So were they still driving, or do those guys have to get out and cross-load?
No, they were driving.
Oh, wow.
And so you knew you had however much fuel in the fuel lines
Yeah.
to get the car back to base, and we only had like a mile to go.
Jeez.
And so I was like, oh, dude, that's not like the movies. The gas tank got hit with an RPG, and it just blew up, and it dumped all the gas out.
That's crazy.
Didn't ignite. And so where it was cinder blocked up, we came back to that, and then we just ran home on the sidewalks, dude. And you'd think like people would be jumping out of the way, but no, the city was fucking,
kind of stand there.
no, the city was dead
Oh.
because Intel had went out.
I say
Hey.
that's also another red flag.
Yeah, exactly right.
Yeah.
And so they're like, yeah, when there's going to be an ambush, and that was our first one. And dude,
Yeah. Yep.
I'll tell you what, we got back to base. We limped that car home. Nobody got hurt. The cars were shot up, and everybody's like, fuck yeah, we made it, dude. Huh? Like laughing and smoking and joking. But then one of the guys was like, hey, we got out of there with dumb luck.
Yeah.
We didn't get out of there because we're high-speed badass operators. From now on, and like I said, that was the first time the team got hit since the team got hit going in initially.
Right.
And so it'd been several months.
Got a little complacent.
Yeah, I mean, that's what happens.
Yeah.
They always say complacency kills, but when you don't hear much going on, you can only have your head on a swivel so much.
Yeah.
And so we got back to base, and we realized, and we kind of got our asses handed to us. Yeah, nobody got hurt, but all our vehicles are fucking ruined, and we fucking limped home. We didn't kill any bad guys. And the team leader's like, hey, never again. He's like, never again.
Yeah.
Like, roger that.
Yeah.
And then the violence in that city, that was like a light switch. It was like, okay, now it's go time.
Okay.
And going into September, October, November, that fall, it cooled down a little bit. We started getting attacked on average 40 times a month.
God dang.
And
Does that include mortar attacks on the
includes
base?
mortars.
Okay.
That includes IEDs. That includes small. That's everything, right? So when people hear that, like, damn, that's a lot. That's not 40 ambushes a month.
Okay.
We'd get ambushed very intermittently. It happened a handful of times. The biggest things that would happen is once you're on venue, they'd try and box you in with mortars, or sniper attacks were big in Ramadi 04 and 05.
Okay.
The contract, actually, a guy was killed from sniper fire
Is that right?
right after the contract was lost to Blackwater.
Oh,
A guy was killed like that month,
dang.
sitting in a guard post
Yeah.
that I manned 100 times.
No kidding.
You know? And so once there was a green light, that city, it just went fucking nuts.
Yeah.
And it got to a point where we were so lucky that we started to feel invincible.
Yeah.
And it got to the point where, I mean, even the team leaders, yeah, they were like, at the time, like, dude, those are salty CAG guys. They were like 32. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
They're like, they did a enlistment in Ranger Regiment, then they went to the unit and they re-upped once, and now they can make a K a day contracting.
Yeah.
Let's go.
Yeah.
And so, like, I remember the team leader would be like, hey guys, this is outside of the realm of the contract. I can't ask you to do this, but let's just go drive around. Let's go do a movement to contact drill.
That's defense.
We're not going to take the principle, and we'll just put it on the books as a route recce.
Yeah.
Let's go have fun.
Area familiarization.
Yeah, dude. Yeah. And we started doing that all the time.
Damn.
And it was just, like you said, it was the Wild West, because What was the acronym you used?
CPA.
CPA.
Coalition Provisional Authority.
And so when this first kicked off, the Coalition Provisional Authority was kind of what was like overseeing everything.
It was the interim government, the interim authority in Iraq. And it was the CPA that was going to establish the new Iraqi government.
And so what that really meant was Americans in Iraq with guns and running missions and running ops, we didn't fall under the jurisdiction of the Iraqis, and we didn't fall under UCMJ. So what did that mean? It really meant you could do whatever the fuck you wanted.
Lawless. Yeah.
Lawless.
Completely lawless.
And now when you got a team of good guys, that doesn't mean you're out killing people. Yeah. You know, plenty of people got killed, but that's because it was Al-Qaeda in Iraq and there was gunfights going on all the time. But the common misconception is that contractors were just over there committing genocide. No. What was going on was we were running operations. Either the legitimate operations were protecting our diplomats and our U.S. officials. And then if you would call them illegitimate operations, was looking for bad guys.
Yeah.
You know, which
but again, that can be called defensive if you're just clearing your, you know, if
your
next
battle
day
space.
You need to, yeah, exactly.
Yep. And that's the thing, man. Like, I mean, we talked about it in our last podcast. The reason why we didn't get our asses handed to us in Barry Cout is because we were a proactive Ranger platoon.
Yeah.
We were on patrol every single day.
Yep.
We were setting in OPs. We were controlling the ridge lines. We were controlling the peaks. We were always conducting overwatch. Same thing as what I feel took care of us in Iraq was that
you can sit back and be a soft target and just wait to get hammered, or you can get out and say, you know, like you said, own the battle space.
Yep. And so I got a funny story about that because I think it was late 2005. I ended up doing like 2 years in Ramadi, and Blackwater won that contract. So by that time, Blackwater had kind of made a name for itself, and it was growing, and it was Eric Prince was a former Navy SEAL, so he had kind of his hands in the SEAL community. So they were getting those guys going to Blackwater. And they just came to us one day and were like, hey, the Triple Canopy lost the contract. Blackwater's coming in like tomorrow or whatever it was. Yeah, we don't know. We don't have a job for you anymore. You can just go.
They sent you guys home, huh?
Well, that was what we were thinking.
Oh, okay.
And then the Blackwater leadership came in and they're like, hey, Ramadi's crazy. We know this. We've read all the sit reps and whatnot, and the AARs. We want you guys to stay if you're willing to. And we're going to, I think, like match your pay. You won't have to go through a train up. You won't have to get vetted through the company. You've already been here for years. We want you guys. So there was a group of us that were like, okay, let's do it. And I ended up, I can't remember all the details, but I think I was home on a 30-day rotation when that officially took place.
Okay.
And so, like I said, remember when I said Blackwater took the contract, a guy got killed almost right away?
Yeah.
That was while...
Oh, that's why you were at home.
I was at home.
Oh, shit.
And so they called me, though, and the team leader's like, hey, they want the old team back.
Yeah.
I said, okay, let's do it. So I went back, and I worked under that company. And, dude, same thing. Gunfights all the time. And the new team leader that was appointed by Blackwater was like pushing these sit reps up to Baghdad to the headquarters element. And we got notified that you guys are getting in too many engagements. This is out of control, blah, blah, blah. And so the team leader's like, types an email. It's like, hey, whatever command element is kind of like chastising us, just come run with us for a week.
Yeah.
Roger that. He actually took him up on it.
Oh, good for him.
So yeah, he came out to Ramadi. We're leaving. We're going on our first op with this guy. And to this day, I think maybe the team leader fucking paid somebody off to do this. We're driving down Route Michigan, and we're pulling into the government center, and a hooded gunman steps out with an AK-47 and raked the car that he was in.
Yeah.
And he's like, get me the fuck out of here. You will never hear another word from me.
Yeah.
Sorry I ever doubted you guys. Yeah, I'm done with this.
Good for him.
Yeah. And from that moment forward, green light. Like whatever was going down was going down.
Perfect.
You know? But yeah, it was interesting to see how like all this time in the Ranger Regiment and all of these patrols and all these deployments, I never saw any real combat. And then as a civilian with a beard and a backwards baseball cap, we're on rooftops.
Yeah.
Fucking
Shooting it out with
smoking
AQI.
dudes. Yeah, it was nuts, dude.
Yeah. That's way different from my experience contracting, just because I went then to that GRS contract, and that was GRS stands for Global Response Staff, and that's a program under the CIA. They sort of got caught with their pants down when the Iraq War kicked off because it became such a hotbed of violence. And case officers are trained to operate in Western Europe. They're not trained to operate in a non-permissive environment. So they really quickly needed, guys that had, tactical experience who could pick up some of the workload. And, sometimes it was just straight security, like escorting a case officer. Sometimes we did some of the actual operational stuff for them, just so they didn't. I mean, why have them leave the base if you're moving a person or moving money or moving equipment? Does the case officer need to go? No, they don't. Mm-hmm. So a lot of times it just became us doing the operations. And the other funny thing is, even under CPA, the CIA is such a bureaucracy and so heavily controlled by lawyers that we had a lot more rules and restrictions. Like that, a movement to contact would never have flown. And in fact, they tried to fire me at one point because I tossed a thermite grenade into one of our armored cars. We'd been T-boned by a Kia bus, which at the time we thought was a failed VBED.
Uh-huh.
And so we jumped out and cross-loaded, and the rear axle was broken. The car was totally disabled, and it had a hardwired Blue Force tracker in it, which has ComSec in it, and then.
So you got two options. You either recover that vehicle or you destroy that vehicle.
Yeah. So I popped the thermite grenade, set it in the cup holder, and burned a $600,000 level 7 Mercedes S600 to the ground. And man, we hadn't been back on, trying to remember what the Fob Merez, I think, was where the base was in Mosul. And the red phone was ringing. They're like, Figgy, they want you on the red phone. And it was some director of security in Washington, D.C. who was livid that I had destroyed the car, and he was trying to sort of put words into my mouth. He's like, so would you think interacting with a cop when they're like, would you say you were going 70 miles an hour in the 60? And you're like, yeah. And I was like, fortunately I was kind of concussed because I think I'd slammed my head off the window when the bus hit us. And fortunately, I was smart enough to be like, no, man, I was making a U-turn. I was going 3 miles an hour, and a bus T-boned us. And a couple of the case officers went to bat for me, which was key. But they tried to fire me because that vehicle was destroyed. So any incident, they were really reports were happening, and it was getting scrutinized. And
yeah,
it's just when the lawyers and the bureaucrats get involved, the fun goes away.
Well, and it doesn't matter for anyone listening that's not been in any type of government operational element. The bureaucracy ruins it at every single level.
Yeah.
And in the contract world, like Foulke was just saying, a bunch of lawyers are scrutinizing what he was doing, and that was
in DC. They're in DC.
Yeah.
I'm in Mosul, Iraq.
That's an on the ground tactical decision.
Yeah.
I don't want this stuff getting in the hands of the wrong people. Let's do it, right? And they're not out any money. It's not going to fucking hurt them at all.
No.
But, you got guys that want to point fingers and pinch pennies, and this guy's boss is mad at this guy because now he has to write a check.
He has to write a report.
Yeah.
And it's going to go in his file against his future promotion maybe. Who knows?
And what you find in the contracting world, and this probably applies to just any element of human beings, if you have a principal, and in the State Department contracts, the principal was the person that you're protecting. If you have a principal that looks out for the team and believes in the team, and most importantly, is willing to take instruction from the team, that makes all the difference in the world, man.
It's huge. And we would work with case officers. Some of them were like that, and they were like, hey, man, I realize this is not my world, and those are a lot of times those were the guys that would not go out into the city with us because for us it's actually extra liability. If something goes down, not only do we have to fight a fight, but now we've got to, grab this guy and run, you know what I mean? Bring him with us.
Yeah, you got to cover and evacuate a guy that's...
And a lot of times they're not in good physical condition,
yeah.
and it literally affects how you plan. Like, what are we going... We can't actually E&E into the desert. We're going to have to find a hard point within 100 meters, make defensive positions and fight it out, because this guy's not running anywhere. And then there were some guys who thought they were John J. Rambo.
Yeah, they never did anything in the military.
Exactly.
And this is their chance to...
And they would sort of explain to you how this operation was going to work, and it's like, oh, you had to handle them with kid gloves. You had to sit them down and be like, hey, look, this technically is your operation, yes. However, we have tactical command, and there would be some real, like, butthurt feelings and high tension in those situations.
And I had that to a much lesser degree, because it wasn't until I moved up to Erbil in Kurdistan where I had some contracts where we would get pushback from the principal. Well, what about this? And what about, why can't we go at this time? And why can't we do that? And it's like, well, there's I'm not coming up with this op order just out of thin air. There's reasons why we want to take this route. There's reasons why we think this is the good time to go. But luckily, or maybe it's actually unfortunate, we never got attacked in Erbil. And because it wasn't violent, they started thinking like, we can just do whatever we want. We can go here whenever we want. And it's still a team of special ops veterans and guys that had been in Ramadi and whatnot. Just because you haven't been attacked doesn't mean you're not going to get attacked.
Yeah.
So guess what? Every operation needs to be ran like a combat operation. And we got a lot of pushback from those people. But while I was in Ramadi, and it was probably just a result of the environment, our principal, his name was Keith Kidd. It's no secret because he became the ambassador to Iraq after our contract. He sat the team down and he goes, hey guys, I'm a lawyer. I don't work out. I don't know how to shoot guns. I'm not like all muscled up like you guys are. Like, I will never give you pushback. I will never question your decisions. You tell me where I need to go, when I need to go. You guys are being paid to keep me alive, and I'm gonna help you guys do that to the best of your ability. And dude, to the point where, like, and I think we might have touched on this last time, to the point where we'd be on the rooftop and we'd be getting in gunfights with dudes, because guys would start like maneuvering on the government center when they knew.
Yep. When the vehicles rolled in, somebody important's there.
Yep. And so he'd get, or the AIC, the agent in charge, who was always next to the principal, would get on the radio. His call sign was the Godfather. He goes, hey, the Godfather says his meeting's wrapped up, but it sounds like you guys are having a good time out there. He's willing to extend it up to another hour if you guys want that. And be like, yep, roger that.
That's awesome.
So yeah, I mean, and that was his chance. You could see it in him. That was, he was a lawyer. He had never been exposed to any of that kind of stuff, and he was digging it.
Yeah.
He was having fun with it.
That's also good leadership.
Yeah, of course it is, man.
Yeah.
And so to this day, the 2 years in Ramadi was like, it was violent, and we saw a lot of bad stuff. We saw kids die, we saw women die, and we saw a lot of bad guys die.
Defund the police.
Yeah, exactly. But what we didn't see was anyone on our own team get killed.
Yeah.
And I think that's good, but it also puts you in a mind space, a mental space where you literally like feel untouchable. Like, on one hand, I knew
it doesn't hurt to be 26 years old.
Yeah, that's true. It's a weird dichotomy, because on one hand, I'd always think like, this is the deployment that's going to get me. I'm going to get killed this time. Because you'd be in Iraq, or you'd be in Ramadi getting ambushed for, like I said, or attacked 40 times a month, and then you'd be home on leave. You have 30 days to go decompress, hang out with your girlfriend, and go pound beers with Dr. Sheely and just be ridiculous. Because it's like, okay, I'm 2 weeks in, at 14 days, I'm going back to Ramadi, and I know what that means. So guess what? I want new motorcycles. I want new guitars. I want, like...
We're going to the strip club.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm going to drink Jaeger bombs every single night until I want to fight the bouncers. Yep. Just a bunch of idiotic shit, because it's
a
like,
good thing we only came home for like 2 to 3 weeks at a time. Yeah, dude. Yeah.
And so, you do feel invincible, but then the other side of it is you've accepted, I'm probably going to get fucking blown up. And it just puts you in a very reckless mindset.
Yeah. When we did our first Afghanistan tour, I did a little bit of like self-reflection before that. And I kind of just came to like a acceptance of like death is the end of the circle and it's got to come. And I won't know it. You know what I mean? Everybody else would be sad, but I won't. I'll be the only one who doesn't know I'm dead. Since then, and I kind of came to a place where I just wasn't afraid of it anymore. And since then, man, Jen sometimes she's like, "How can you not worry about all these things?" Blah blah blah. And I'm like, "Well, I'm gonna die, and I'm not afraid of the day I die. So I'm just gonna kind of have some fun and do what I do until that day." And it takes a lot of stress out of life, and all these people who are losing their damn minds on social media and media and everything. Everybody should probably just relax a little bit and realize if you're 40 years old, you're halfway. And you might want to spend a little less time sort of ranting and raving and a little more time just going for a walk in the sun or something.
Yep.
Or riding a downhill mountain bike.
Or doing jiu-jitsu.
Right.
I talked about on my last podcast because I talked about like veterans depression and veterans suicide and PTSD and all that stuff. And to tell you the truth, I think a lot of that, people always say like they believe that it's rooted in like the traumas of combat. Like I saw this little kid get ejected from a car and laying dead in the street, and now that's going to wake me up and cause nightmares, which I'm sure that there's an element of that that's true. But I think a bigger portion of it is not, like we talked about last time, is obviously having something to spend your money on or your time on, having a hobby, for you it's your mountain biking group, for me it's jiu-jitsu. But I also think it's rewiring your brain to accept I'm going to be a fucking grandpa someday. Like that is my future now. Your future isn't fighting on the streets and dying in some fucking glorious gun battle.
Yeah, we're not as interesting as we used to be, or at least as we thought we were. And we were. Yeah. Again, you're 26. You're Genghis Khan in your own mind, right?
Yep. But you know how I know that that's like an issue for me still is because with all this stuff popping up in the streets and in Seattle and across our nation, I mean, I literally just built the nicest rifle and I got the night vision optics and I got everything. This is a rifle that I would want to carry in Iraq as a Ranger.
Yes.
And I'm like, oh, it's going down. I'm getting ready. And as I sit here right now talking, I think that it might be. But the thing that's kind of crazy is I'm excited about it.
Yeah.
No,
there is a part, it's that old warrior spirit.
Yeah.
That goes, okay, oh, this might be happening. Let's go get involved.
What's going to really fucking ruin my day is if everything dies down and then this kicks off again when we're like 60
yeah,
and I got a bad hip. I mean, they told me that I'd need a full knee replacement before 40. That's in 2.5 months. And it hasn't happened yet. I feel pretty good. Nice. But dude, yeah, Civil War II is not going to kick off until our bodies are failing us. And then we're going to have to sit and watch it from our front porch.
Right. Yeah.
Which might be good.
Yeah, it could be. Yeah. It depends on where that front porch is. So maybe we should be buying houses in Seattle.
I know, right? So then you did, we both kind of contracted all over the place. And I did, I left Ramadi. I went to Baghdad. And I actually lived out in the city for like 3 months. And that was on the IRI contract.
Okay.
They're looking for the cheapest real estate.
Good God.
And they're not pipe hitters.
Yeah.
Like they're not one of the mega agencies that can just throw millions of dollars at the contract. So they found this house out in the city, and it was just south. For those of you that have been to Baghdad, if you were in the IZ, you go south across the 14th. Was it the 14th July Bridge? Is that what it was called?
Sounds right. I never worked in Baghdad.
Okay, it was the 14th of July Bridge that led out of the green zone going southbound. And you'd go like a mile out into the city there, and we just had a house. And we were living out in the city. And bro, we weren't there. I wasn't there. I just started dating my wife.
Yeah.
I just started dating Jenny, and then I deployed. And then we found dead bodies in our water tank.
Ugh.
And I told her that. And I was like, dude, if this chick's like cool with these kind of stories, maybe I'll keep her around a little bit. Like, yeah, I had to pull dead bodies out. Bro, that's straight up medieval, like biological warfare.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Hey, let's fucking poison these guys. So they're like, okay, well, we know they know we're here and we know they want us dead. Great.
Yeah.
Because we don't have a QRF.
Yeah.
We don't have shit.
Did you have static security?
We had static. So there was 2 teams that lived in the house. One was 100% static security that had sandbag bunkers built on the rooftops and around had a couple checkpoints set out. And we pushed out a perimeter, and then also hired a local guard force. And then we had our mobile team, which was I was on, going around the city doing.
Campaigning?
Yeah, just bullshit, dude. I think to this day, I was in Ramadi and I got ambushed plenty of times, but that's like, you know it, you expect it, and you can see it, and you can also feel it, like we talked about earlier, when the streets go dead and the shops close their doors and they pull those grates down, and all the kids stop kicking their soccer balls. It's like a silence kind of just comes over everything. And now you're literally looking around, and I've had it come over the radio. Hey, you guys feel that awkwardness? Like, it's going down. Be ready.
Yep.
Boom. Like, you start to know it.
Yeah.
But Baghdad, and this was also in Ramadi. I was on a high pro detail. Baghdad was low pro. So we'd be up in Sadr City, like you were saying earlier, IP checkpoints, Iraqi police checkpoints. I was probably closer to death on that deployment than I ever knew.
Yeah, no, the IPs were always. I always thought that it would be an IP that killed us, Iraqi policemen, not AQI. They were there, and like we talked about offline. A lot of times, policemen by day, Al Qaeda by night. So you never really knew who was trying to kill you, who was collecting information on you as you were driving around.
And it's also fluid. Like, today, the Americans are paying better. And then tomorrow, Al Qaeda came in and took my uncle and all my aunts and all that bullshit. And said, hey, guess what?
You work for us now.
You work for us now. If you want to see your kid again, like, the most vile shit human beings could do, they would do.
Yeah.
Like, everybody hears the term suicide bomber and thinks like, oh, it's a religious extremist. Sometimes, yes. Other times, hey,
coerced into it.
I have your kid. If you don't do this, we're going to behead him. Yeah. And the dad would be like, well, I guess I got to do this.
Yeah.
Because they would find him handcuffed to the steering wheel. Like, they were forced into that shit. Yeah. Just the most vile shit ever. But anyways, in Baghdad, like, I didn't fire my rifle one time. Never got contacted, never hit an IED. And I think that was due to just being low pro.
Yeah.
Like you mentioned earlier, we should have just pushed play when we were talking about that.
Yeah, I know.
But like, when you're running low pro, they probably see you. But when by the time they see you, they're looking at your rear bumper.
They identify you as the moment has passed. It is the moment when they should have hit the trigger that they ID you, and then the moment is gone, and it's, oh, crap.
Yep. And then it was also a lot busier in Baghdad. Like, bazaars, the streets were packed.
Yeah.
And it just seemed a little more hectic and chaotic. And I think it would have been a harder area for them to set in ambushes like I saw out in Anbar.
Sure. Especially if they weren't locals. And a lot of those AQI guys were coming in from, all over the world, Chechnya and Afghanistan and Kazakhstan and, and even from other regions within Iraq.
And think about that, dude. You got to respect that.
Yeah.
Think about that. If you're 22 years old or whatever, and you're like, you know what?
Travel halfway across the world.
I'm gonna go. I'm Islamic fundamentalist. This is what I believe. I think the Americans are the infidels. Let's go fucking kill them.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people always think like, well, if Americans were in my backyard invading, I'd fight too. And there's some validity to that statement.
Yeah. Oh,
right?
If the Chinese invaded tomorrow, are you going to tell me that we wouldn't all be out running around in the mountains screaming Wolverines?
Wolverine. Damn it. You took it out. You took the word. Yeah. And I'll be happy about it.
And to that point, for all the gun control freaks who say, well, you know what? You can't resist a tyrannical government that has tanks and airplanes with an AR-15. Oh, yes, you can.
Oh, yes,
There's a group called the Taliban
can.
that's been doing it real well since 1980.
Yep.
And you absolutely can.
No, those guys have a will.
Yeah.
They have a will to win, and they're willing to die for their cause.
Yes.
So good luck.
Yeah.
You know, that makes a very adversarial enemy when they have those
and
two
they
things
live there.
going
When
for
you
them.
live there, you're not on a time schedule. There is no objective. There is no budget. There is no schedule. It's if I want to fight today, I'll fight. And if I just want to go home and eat and play with my kids, I'll do that.
Or if I want to walk across the Pakistani border and sit in a hut for 4 months because the snow's too deep,
Yeah, do that.
done.
Yeah.
And also, do you remember watching those guys walk through the mountains
Oh, like
when
Billy
we're
goats.
probably as fit as young Americans could be?
Yeah. Yeah.
And they could just trot up the mountains at 11,000 feet.
Yeah, they were like mountain goats.
Basically super.
Crazy.
Yeah, they're eating bread.
Those guys should be running marathons in the Olympics is what they should be doing.
Yeah, they're eating those beans, those little diced up orange potatoes on bread.
Yep.
Cooked over human shit.
Yep.
In case, if you didn't know that, Afghanis in these like remote villages, they cook their food with their own feces because it's a fuel source. And they could just walk Rangers into the dirt.
Yeah.
Bizarre.
Yeah. Yeah. Boy.
So then when you left Iraq, you did a couple more contracts, Pakistan.
Yeah. Should we rewind it here and talk GRS selection? Because that was actually a pretty intense selection on its own. That one had an attrition rate. I know we graduated 3 guys, and I think we started with 20 or 25.
Yeah, man. I like to keep these around 2 hours. We got 20 more minutes.
Oh, you said 13.
Oh, yeah, I was lying. Plus, it's getting late.
I'll give you the abridged version.
No, you don't got to give us the abridged version. Like, I want to hear about this selection. So
Okay. So I came home from Baghdad with TC and just kind of I had a girlfriend and some friends up in Bellingham, so I moved up there and was going to the junior college up there, and just not liking college, but basically doing it so I could collect GI Bill and pay rent. And Dave's stepdad had retired from Special Forces, and he had a contact who was putting together former Special Operations guys for a contract in Iraq. And all he would tell us about it was like, "Hey, man, this is some real cowboy shit. You know, don't do this one unless you're serious." And we're like, "Oh, you can't tell that to a 25-year-old Ranger and think they're gonna like, hey, this is intriguing."
Yeah, don't threaten me with a good time.
Exactly. So we sent in our resumes, kind of not knowing if they would even accept us, and they did. And so moved out of my apartment, packed all my stuff up, and flew out to Virginia. And I just, back again, these are the days of dial-up internet. So you just have like a sheet you printed out off the email that has an address of a hotel and says check in, and then be in the lobby the following morning at, it's like 4:30 a.m. in PT gear. And so we're all, 4:30 in the morning, we're all kind of standing down in the lobby, sort of looking at each other. Nobody knows, I knew Dave, and then nobody else knew anybody. And so immediately,
How many dudes were there?
I'm going to say 20 to 25.
Was anyone in their military PTs? There's always
God,
always one.
I think
dude.
there was one guy. I think you're right. Still has the brush cut.
Yeah.
So anyway, immediately a PT test, and I think we dropped 2 guys right there, which is crazy to me. Like, why even bother to get on the plane if you know you can't? I mean, everybody who's been in the military knows the standards, and so don't get on the plane if you can't pass the PT test. But anyway,
What do they think they're going to do? Like sneak by?
yeah, I have no idea. Or maybe who knows what they're thinking. I can't tell you what they're thinking. But
I always say this too. If the PT test is, if you're concerned about that event,
you're not ready.
don't show up.
Yeah. So PT test, and then we immediately I said, get showered, come on back down here. We're going to an indoor range just for a quick qualification, which it all seemed kind of weird at first to me. So again, got dressed, went to an actual indoor range that they had rented for the morning, and they just had us do some basic courses of fire that seemed kind of rudimentary, like, they load 2 rounds into your Glock magazine, draw and fire 2 rounds. I was like, okay. And they're videotaping as we're doing this. And it was only one at a time. And then we went back to their office, and they called us into a conference room one at a time. And the same thing, they had the video camera set up on a tripod, and they had the 2 instructors and the project manager and maybe 1 or 2 other guys from the office were sitting in there. And so there was an M4 and a Glock and a holster and a magazine holder on the table. And they said, okay, go ahead and holster up, sling that M4. They said, okay, now imagine the magazine is loaded. Go ahead, load and make ready your weapon. So I'd load both Glock and M4. And they said, okay. They had a piece of tape on the far side, the far wall, and they said, okay, go ahead and present your M4. Do a ready up on this piece of tape. Okay. Now transition to your Glock. Okay. And all this kind of sort of basic stuff, and they're filming the entire time. And I'll circle back around to that in a little bit when it'll all kind of bring it home. But so anyway, from there we went to, we spent a week at a place called CQD in Easton, Maryland, Close Quarters Defense. And it was heavily, this guy had clearly sold the agency on his sort of like mix of martial arts and tactical training. And I think he trained a lot of SWAT teams and whatnot. And I think he had sort of sold himself to the SEAL teams as well. And our 2 instructors for that class were SEALs. And I think that's how he sort of got his in with GRS and the agency. And so
I think I know who you're talking about. Can I say his name?
Yeah.
Dieter?
Yes.
Okay.
And
the Dieter stance with your toes touching?
Yeah. So some of that stuff was like really weird and goofy, and we're like, oh no, but you want the job. So
yeah, exactly.
You play the game. And some of it made sense to me because they were, as you can't fight. You can't do jujitsu when you're wearing body armor and have an M4 slung across your chest and a Kevlar helmet
it's very
on.
different.
So it was actually good that someone was acknowledging that martial arts in tactical gear doesn't always work. And then they had that, did you go there?
No.
Okay. So at the very last day, they do maybe the best training I've ever had in my life, which is they call it the hooded box drill, where they have a pulley in the ceiling and they drop a hood over your head. And then they turn on these speakers with like loud, like you can't hear it, just boom, 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 drums and people shouting and stuff. And you've got a Sims gun. You've got a 9mm simunition pistol in your holster. And when they yank the hood off, and there's a situation in front of you, and it might be a guy standing literally nose to nose with you with a knife who immediately starts stabbing you with a rubber knife, or it might be a woman running at you holding out her baby, and you have to react to that situation. And I got to say, that's the best tactical training I've ever gone through.
Yeah, I'm sure. I mean, just thinking about it as someone that's been through probably thousands of training scenarios through military and law enforcement, the ones that force you to make a decision and make it right now,
Yeah.
It's always the toughest.
Yeah.
Like, what's the saying go? I'm going to butcher this, but a bad decision now is better than...
What I remember is a bad decision executed with violence and aggression is better than a good decision executed meekly.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's exactly it. Like, you might not possibly... If you had time to sit down and map it out, you'd probably do something a little different. But hey, this is what we got. This is what I'm doing, and I'm going to just fucking go for it.
Yeah.
I'm going to go with it.
Yeah. And so that wrapped up the week at CQD. And then we went for 2 weeks. We went to, again, this is some guy's range, and I think it was North Carolina. They had rented he had a full facility there, like a 200-yard flat range and a pistol range, and he had a couple of kill houses there. And I think we spent 1 or 2 days on the flat range. And again, they're just sort of going through courses of fire, pretty basic stuff. And then we started hitting that shoot house, man. And it was all simunitions, and they had role players out there. And the situation was always that a case officer was in a meeting, and the meeting had gone sideways. And you would either get an execute word on the radio from the case officer, or you just hear gunshots inside and know that something was going down. And so it was always 2-man clear to secure the case officer and then extract them back out to the vehicle. And they only allowed 1 mulligan. You could have one bad shoot where you shot a non-combatant, or at times, you know, you would bust into the room and the case officer would fire a shot at you, and you had to have the recognition that that's my guy, and he just fired a shot over my head because his you know, he's role playing, his adrenaline is jacked up. He's just been attacked, and now someone busted into the room, so he busted off a shot at them, and you couldn't shoot back. And we started dropping guys really fast out there, and it got down to where it was just me, Dave, and one other guy, and this was with like 3 days to go, and they didn't stop. It was just hit the shoot house, go back out, reload magazines, reset scenarios, hit the shoot house, and man.
And now that you're down to 3 guys, you're not getting any downtime either.
Just sucking gas and like, you know, we're doubled over breathing as we're jamming our magazines for the next iteration. And everybody, you know, you see in the movies, you know, the guys in whatever, they're fighting in some firefight and they're looking kind of fresh and they're little spritzed or whatever. CQB is hard, man. You're wearing all that heavy gear and you're totally smoked. And also we're a lot of times the case officer that we're extracting is wounded or dead, and so we're throwing him over our shoulder and running back out through, you know, fighting our way back out with this guy over our shoulder. And so I've never been so happy to finish a training iteration in my life as when that second week ended, because I was just so smoked from running through that shoot house. But anyway, Dave and I and this other guy graduated, and then or passed, or whatever you want to call it. There's no graduation. And then
there's no certificates, there's no plaques, there's no honor grad. Hey, congratulations, you made it.
Yeah, you got the job.
Yeah.
And so
what were they paying back then for the CIA contracts?
It was $750 a day.
Okay.
And then at times it would be $1,000. They would do what they called 90 for 90, where if the single guys would cover Thanksgiving, Christmas, and New Year's in a 90-day rotation, they'd pay $90K for 90 days.
Oh, K a day.
Yeah. Yeah.
The good old days,
right?
Man.
Yeah. And to be 26 with no responsibilities and no bills and, I mean, nothing at home, that all went straight in the bank.
The reality of how much money we made as young mid-20-year-olds, we should be retired for the rest of our life.
But we were 26 and retarded.
And guess what? Yeah. I don't fucking regret any of it.
No, it was fun. Yeah. So then I went and did a pretty boring rotation in Al-Hilla, which was at the time a pretty quiet. There was no real. The AQI wasn't there. The Army or the Marine, I guess it was a Marine Corps AO, and they weren't really seeing much action. It was interesting. Sort of, I'm a history nerd, and the ruins of Babylon were half a mile from the consulate there. So you know, we got to go over there. We would schedule area familiarizations and go check out the old Ishtar gates and the big mounds and whatnot, and kind of scout out the old site.
That's so awesome.
Yeah, yeah. And then
and like so many people never have an opportunity to see some of that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
You know, and like the Taliban destroyed
God damn it.
Everything.
Yeah.
In Afghanistan that had any type of historical significance, monuments, statues.
And then ISIS did the same in northern Iraq.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
So anyone listening, stop destroying shit of historical significance.
Even if you don't like it, 1,000 years from now, someone will think it's interesting.
Yeah. Nope. Let's just get rid of it.
Right. So anyway, it was still an interesting 90-day deployment. I was learning a lot about like espionage, tradecraft, and whatnot. Because again, a lot of times there was no reason for the case officers to go with us operationally, because we were. I kind of joke and I say we were smugglers. We smuggled people, money, and equipment. And when you're doing that, you can bring, if the only time a case officer needs to be there is to talk to a person. So we could always smuggle the person to the case officer.
Yeah.
Which wasn't always the case. Sometimes the higher level guys would need to go to a political office or go to an asset, and we'd take them with us. But we tried as much as possible to do it ourselves. So just because it was just more liability that we're dragging around with us. So anyway, went home from that deployment for a couple weeks and then came back, and this time I got assigned up in Mosul. And this was at the end of 2004, I think. And things were starting to get hot up there. This was after the Battle of Fallujah.
Yeah.
And all those guys had been, the AQI guys had been pushed out of Fallujah, and they all fled north.
Mm-hmm.
And they all landed in Mosul. And so Mosul was getting hot. And so it was always intense because there were car bombs in the cities and ambushes and whatnot. And again, like, I don't want to talk too much. Like, we just did low profile, and I don't want to give too much away because I think there's still, I know there are still GRS teams worldwide.
Yeah.
But we did a good job of not being visible, and we avoided a lot of it. And we'd sort of see it because you can't miss the Army convoys. Mosul's not a big city. And so sometimes, we'd be driving up Route Tampa or whatever, Route Lexus, and you'd see the Army getting hit. And a lot of times more the danger was just the crossfire. Like, sometimes we're right, there's 50 cals from the strikers firing and PKMs from AQI guys on a rooftop, and we're trying to like scoot through and just get the hell out of Dodge,
Well, dude, I don't know if it was like that up north, but we literally took the same amount of contact, if not more, from U.S. forces.
We were never
than enemy engagements.
Yeah, we were never directly engaged intentionally, but it always, because the Army cats were on high alert as well, and we're in. They don't know that we're Americans, and so it was always. And one time a Kiowa Warrior helicopter lined up on us, and that was scary.
Good
dude.
luck.
Yeah, it dropped down right in front of our windshield, and we're throwing the orange panels.
Yeah, VS-17s.
VS-17s and American flags and stuff up in the windshield. And fortunately, he broke off. But then again, and then the other thing that was always really kind of hairy in Mosul is that there were checkpoints everywhere. You couldn't go 2 blocks without hitting an IP checkpoint.
Uh-huh.
And just because the IPs 2 blocks away were friendly, 2 blocks later, this is a different neighborhood, different tribe, different group of guys, and they might not like Americans. They might be, or just wanting to, flex some authority or whatever. And so, and in those, when you're stopped at those checkpoints, you're really vulnerable, because, you're, a lot of times we're working it's just 2 of us in a car. And, when you're stopped, number one defense is just the fact that we're a moving target. Now that we're stopped.
Speed is security.
Yeah. There's a belt-fed PKM 8 feet away pointed right at the window, which, it's level 7, but how many PKM rounds can a level 7 window stop before it doesn't stop them?
Yeah.
So those checkpoints were always hair-raising. And then let me see, the one incident that really, really, like, that one was, I just thought we were going to die here today, is one of our paid assets had told us, he gave us the description of the vehicles we drove, and he said the Iraqi police in town, they think that these vehicles are Israeli Mossad agents, and they want to kill you. I'm like, oh. Well, now how do you spread that? That wasn't in our repertoire to spread counter rumors. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
And we can't get new vehicles.
But dude, that's such a common tactic over there.
Yeah.
To just, what's the whole, the enemy of my enemy is my friend? Like,
yeah.
To pit other operational elements against each other. Remember that happened to us in Afghanistan. They'd be like, hey, this guy that you really want is in this village and he's in this house.
He's the bomb maker.
And we'd go hit it and it'd be a dry hole. And then it'd be like, hey, no, dum-dum. The guy that gave you that intel just hates me.
Yeah.
So he wanted to set up an American raid on my house.
He owes me for a goat he never paid me for. He was hoping you guys would smoke me.
So it's the same thing. Someone out in the city didn't like you guys.
Yeah.
Like, you know what? How do I get rid of them?
Yeah.
Well, instead of doing it myself, let's just get stoke the fire of the rumor mill and get more people looking at these guys sideways and see if we can kind of just create an incident.
Yeah. And so it was right after that, man, we got balled up at a IP checkpoint, and they pulled a bunch of armored vehicles in to box us in and started loading the belts into the PKMs. And it was like, oh, they're not even going to talk. They're just going to start shooting the car up. And just right then a striker patrol came rolling by, and those guys would monitor an unencrypted frequency, and we had an embedder in the car. So we jumped on that unencrypted freak and said, hey, stop.
Help!
Yeah. U.S. patrol rolling on Route Lexus. Stop right now. This is Central Intelligence Agency, and we're balled up at this checkpoint, and we need you guys to stop and verify our identity for these guys. And so they hit the brakes and like reversed back to the checkpoint, and those guys saw them reversing, and they immediately moved their vehicles and let us, and we just floored it and got out of there. Yeah, that was the one where I was like, man, this is it. There's nothing I can do. Totally helpless, because you can't shoot out from a level 7. As soon as you drop the windows, you're
if you break. That's one of the interesting things about a protection detail is your primary battle drill is always break contact.
Yeah.
That's it.
That's it.
And so
run away, run away.
He bravely ran away. So your battle drills break contact, but part of breaking contact is also returning fire superiority.
Yeah.
But then you don't want to crack seals either, because then you lose all of your protection.
Yeah.
You know?
And we would get really frustrated up in Mosul in particular, because we were co-located with like the Delta headquarters element, and those guys were going out and getting it on like almost every night. And it was like, man, we're missing out on all these offensive operations, and our job is just to, scoot through and not cause a ripple if we can. And, that story I told you offline, there was a day where one of the case officers he's kind of flustered and pacing and looking at his phone, and said, "Hey, Rich, what's up, man?" He says, "Oh, this high-level AQI personality, he's having lunch in a cafe 1.5 miles from here right now." And I said, "Perfect, I'll go grab the guys. We'll wrap him up." "No, you can't do that." So why can't I do that? It's because you guys are civilian contractors, and again, the agency is a bureaucracy, and we can't have you partaking in an offensive operation as civilian contractors.
We're also Rangers and Force Recon Marines.
Yeah, and
let's go.
It was an 8-man team. It was Force Recon, Force, Ranger, SF, Force, Ranger. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's like, what do you mean we can't wrap? This guy's eating shawarma.
Yeah, get the fuck out
Let's
of
get
here.
some zip ties. We'll be back in 15 minutes. And
They wouldn't
do it.
give you the green light, huh?
Delta and the Rangers were out on an objective. Big Army wouldn't. It was their when you tell a Big Army commander his primary responsibility is area patrol, HVT capture becomes a secondary.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So you can't just call him and be like, "Hey, HVT sitting in a cafe and he's going to divert a platoon to go take care of it." So they refused the mission, and this guy ended up getting away that day.
It's funny you say, like, you were on the base seeing the Rangers and the CAG guys go out and mix it up, and you're like, damn, I want to be doing that. And I guarantee you all those CAG guys and Rangers are sitting in their hooch thinking, fuck, man, I wish I could just chill out and make $90K in this 3-month deployment.
Oh, those guys are going on another liquor store run, aren't they?
Yeah, those guys just get to drink booze and get rich and work out all day. Fuck.
Yeah.
But hey, that's how it goes, man.
Yeah.
If you're not bitching, you're not deployed.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah. And so I probably did 5 or 6 rotations to Mosul over the next 1.5 years, I think. And then I eventually went to, I did 2 pretty cool rotations. I did one to Peshawar, Pakistan, and one to Jerusalem. And then I ended up back in Iraq for another probably 1.5 years after that. And I don't know, we're at the 2-hour mark. Do you want to leave that for another time, or?
Yeah, why don't we do that, man? I mean, these are topics that we could talk on for hours and hours and hours.
Yeah.
But yeah, you've told me a lot of cool stories about Israel.
Yeah.
You've told me a lot of cool stories about Pakistan.
Yeah.
And since you took the conversation way off topic at the beginning and got me sidetracked, I think this would be a good place to wrap up. And
We covered meth head theft,
yeah,
IRI contracting, and the CIA.
and it basically gives you one more excuse to weasel your way back on another episode.
Right? Yeah.
All right, man. Well, you got anything else in?
No. You want to tease your next upcoming episode so people know what you have planned, or do you like surprising people on Thursdays?
Well, I'll tell you what we have in the works, and I'm not sure how many weeks this is out, but when me and Foulke talked about the Ranger Regiment last time, we had people reaching out to us asking for, basically kind of guidance on how to be a team leader and what you think the best approach to leadership is as a young enlisted guy. And it's the power of the internet, man, because now they can reach out to guys like us that are 40, that have kids and families, kind of different perspectives, and they can kind of pick our brains and see what we would have done differently or what we did well as team leaders, because they're in our shoes right now, 22 years old. They're a Ranger team leader or they're a Tab Spec 4, and they want to know.
And even just in the civilian world, filling leadership roles, both paramilitary contracting and just, for Greg as a policeman and me in construction, like, I've learned a lot about leading people and dealing with personalities and whatnot. And also just to throw in there, like some of you guys who messaged us, if we didn't get back to you, we heard you and we're working on it. So hang in there.
Yep. And I've said it before, Jocko's made an entire career on using military leadership and tactics and applying it to the civilian world.
Well,
because they're not that different.
No, not at all. Leadership is leadership, no matter corporate, blue collar, military, law enforcement, fire, like whatever you're doing, leadership is leadership, and team building is team building. It's all the same.
Yep. All right, so that'll be coming up soon, guys. But until then, thanks for listening. We appreciate it, and that's a wrap.